It's the Harris Football Podcast with your host, Christopher Harris.
Welcome! Hey, everybody. Welcome in. My name is Chris, and this is a show about spices. Kitchen spices is all we're going to talk about. Just spices, your nutmeg, a little paprika. That's what we got going on today. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you being here as we get into the second week in December. The audience does diminish a little bit because people aren't going to be in their fantasy playoffs and they get other stuff going on and they're a little busy and they don't listen. But if you stick around, I love you. If you can't, I love you. Thank you so much for making my life better. We have to get started today, I think, with the huge offensive explosion in the snow, the Bills hanging on to beat the Bengals when it looked for most of the day like it would be a Cincinnati win. Also, a word about weather. Boy, oh boy, I know those of you who come on the Sunday morning live streams worry about weather a lot. And also, you all hear me say this a lot, so I apologize for repeating myself to you. But man, do a lot of people freak out about weather. You fret, you worry, you spend emotional energy. Hey, should I bench Jamar Chase? I mean, I guess, maybe you should have benched Jamar Chase. I would say please don't make your decisions because of the snow or the rain. Very high winds are what we should care about. And I think one problem is that everybody up and down the weather chain has a reason to make it seem like every game's weather conditions are a huge deal. Nobody wants to tell you not to worry, because if they tell you not to worry, then you might not tune in. There were plenty of points in the rain in Jacksonville, as we'll discuss later in the show. And in this game, Bengals-Bills, Greg Olsen was announcing the game. He said it right away. I mean, they had an interview with Joe Burrow, and he said it in that interview too. Snow is actually better for the offense. They know where they're going. Plus, we can also say, by the second half of this game, it wasn't even snowing anymore. So anyway, high wind. That's what you're worrying about. Otherwise, mostly don't. Just don't. All right. You didn't, in fact, get the big Jamar Chase game in this one, and you didn't get the huge James Cook game, but I have to tell you that you're obviously not getting clever with either of those players if you are going to make it in your fantasy playoffs. Chase was really shut down by scheme in the first half. He got going a little bit in the second. Cook had an interesting day, stretching for the pylon in the third quarter and fumbling. On replay, it was ruled he was out of bounds, but then same drive, couple plays later, Buffalo is at the one and Cook fumbles into the end zone to lose possession after all. But my goal, watching these games for you in December, isn't to nitpick your obvious fantasy stars. Let's try and, I don't even want to say go a little deeper. Let's just try not to dwell too much on the obvious. Joe Burrow and Josh Allen, two of the best in the business. The Bengals are cooked now, but I can't come up with a reason myself why Burrow wouldn't continue to play in December. So until further notice, we're using him. Obviously, he lost his mind with the first of the fourth quarter interceptions, just shot putting it directly to Christian Brentford with a lead. It's a pick six, and then they get the ball on the kickoff, very next play. I mean, that one wasn't his fault. That was deflected at the line and intercepted, and suddenly the ball game was basically over when it felt like the Bengals had control of it. Allen was incredible. Scrambled for a 40-yard touchdown, the longest score running of his career. Scrambled on a fateful third down, meaning that the Bengals could not get the ball back for one miracle drive at the end. Chase Brown scores twice. Did not exactly set the world on fire, and honestly, probably should have caught a second touchdown on a long ball that went through his hands in the fourth quarter. And he lost some third and fourth down work to Samaje Perine. I gotta say, it's probably the best I ever saw Samaje Perine play, but we're not using him. We are using Chase Brown. T. Higgins is obviously going to bear some watching this week. It was Higgins converting multiple third downs on the first Bengals drive. He scored a beautiful touchdown in the first quarter, toe-tapping in the end zone. Then late second quarter, the ball was thrown out of bounds deep, but Higgins tried to go get it anyway with one hand. He reached way up. He fell backwards. He banged the back of his head on the turf, came out of the game momentarily, but was back in the next possession, had a gnarly drop on the first drive of the second half, but he converts a big third down in the fourth quarter and then bangs the back of his head again, and he's dazed and he's pointing at his head. Boys, I'm not sure your concussion protocol is working, because after a delay, T. Higgins was back in there again, and in fact would catch, I mean, it's not a garbage time touchdown, because the Bengals still did have a faint hope of getting the ball back and trying to score another time, but it was an emergency mode touchdown anyway, you'd say, that made it 39-34. I mean, he stayed in the game, so I have to imagine that whatever facade the concussion protocol is, he passed it. So I'm guessing that he'll be available for next week, but we'll have to keep track of it for sure. You'll never believe this, but the Bills still don't have a wideout you can even remotely trust. Okay, Khalil Shakir remotely. You can trust him remotely. He did score a touchdown in the first quarter. What a crazy play by Josh Allen. I mean, it's not really about Shakir on that play. Scrambles around, goes to his right. He's about to get hit, decides, what the heck, throws it in the end zone over a defender's back-turned shoulder, and somehow it gets in there to Khalil Shakir. But that was one of two catches, and it was the tight ends that had a huge day, both of them, for Buffalo. Something we did talk about a lot last week, and I talked about to the live streamers on Sunday morning. The Bengals have sort of reconciled themselves on defense. We are going to play our safeties deep, and our corners are going to give some cushion. And, if you want to throw 100 times to your tight ends, we're going to make you march the ball slowly down the field. And so Josh Allen did that. He did it more to Dawson Knox early on, but Dalton Kincaid was out there after his multi-week hamstring injury. He scored a touchdown in the second half. Knox played more snaps because he's more of a blocker. Kincaid ran 16 routes to Knox's 13 routes. And, is it possible we change our minds with more input as these games continue? Yes, but at the moment, Kincaid would still be the one I would start. You got Gabe Davis getting a red zone slant early. You can imagine how that went. Keon Coleman with a catch down to the 2-yard line in the third quarter, but couldn't get in. Even Shakir, coming off that big game in Houston in that loss on Thursday night, proceeded to do 1 catch and 5 yards last week, 2 catches and 16 yards yesterday. He's a good player. He's at best part of the sadness, though. It's just where we will continue to be with Bills receivers all season, heading into Week 15, when the Bills play the Patriots, while the Bengals will begin playing out the string next week in a rematch against the Ravens.
Today's kickoff.
Okay, on today's show, let's keep it up here. Second week in December. We are on the verge of the fantasy playoffs. We'll try and talk mostly about the decisions you might need to make as we get into this most crucial and also very fun time of year. We've got 7 more games for you today. I've watched them all. We will talk about Steelers-Ravens, Saints-Buccaneers, Seahawks-Falcons, and Rams-Cardinals. I will do a preview of Monday night's game, Eagles-Chargers, and then my guest will be the young boy, Matt Harmon from Yahoo Fantasy and ReceptionPerception.com. Matt and I have watched 3 other games all the way through as well. We'll have Colts-Jags, Bears-Packers, and Texans-Chiefs. I think it'll be fun, and I thank you again for listening today. If it's a day that ends in Y, the first thing I did this morning, I put the powder in the water. I drank my AG1 for the day. They've been with us a long time on the show. I feel better in the gym when I drink my AG1. I feel like I'm giving myself the best nutrition, replacing my multivitamin. And because I drink it on an empty stomach, well, there are prebiotics and probiotics built right in. So my stomach has the best possible chance of absorbing the nutrition. And I just pause to emphasize here, if you struggle with your tummy, with regularity, other stuff, seriously, try AG1. It has just changed my stomach's life. AG1 has their best offer ever right now. Go to drinkag1.com/Harris. You'll get a welcome kit, a morning person hat, a bottle of vitamin D, an AG1 flavor sampler, And you get to try their new sleep supplement, AGZ, which I have been using every night. Tastes great. I have the chocolate flavor. I cut out melatonin completely. I use AGZ as well. So that is drinkag1.com/Harris for free gifts for new subscribers. And seriously, tummy issues, sleep issues, you don't like using melatonin, check them out.
You don't say Zay Flowers anymore.
All right, let's get back into it, and we'll talk about the Steelers going to Baltimore and winning against Zay Flowers and the Ravens, a team that we thought would recover from Thanksgiving night and right the ship. They did not do that. The division-leading Pittsburgh Steelers and Aaron Rodgers played their best game in a while. The defense held up against Lamar Jackson, maybe got a little officiating help at the end, but the way I was talking about Pittsburgh, the way we all were talking about Pittsburgh, not least Pittsburgh fans, you certainly would not have thought that they would be 1 or 2 calls away from a close win. Of course, the question we ask ourselves this time of year, how much are we willing to change course because of what we just saw, when in this case, what we just saw contradicts so much of what we'd seen over the recent past. And that's the question and the case for the Steelers. They came out throwing. They really threw this entire game. First play of the game is a bomb to DK Metcalf. The entire month of November, they didn't complete a single pass of 20-plus air yards. This first play goes 55. I mean, it was like 40 in the air. And they would throw several more deep balls. Metcalf was probably a little unlucky not to add a touchdown to his 148 receiving yards, a 3rd and 2 in the second quarter. Great catch by Metcalf on the sidelines. They did hit him in the red zone one time, but he got tackled. This was a good game out of Aaron Rodgers. I don't want to say great. The second half, they definitely crawled into a little more of a shell, and like Rodgers did his typical 3rd and long checkdowns that had no shot of converting. But listen, first play of the third quarter, Rodgers scrambled around forever, kept the play alive. Metcalf probably wasn't the initial target, but he did the scramble drill thing and caught another deep ball. At that point, one play into the second half, Metcalf was at 5 for 133. Obviously, he would only do 15 more yards, not too much else. But yeah, we talked a lot on the show last week. What are we going to do with DK Metcalf in a fantasy league? And I think we decided we were benching him if we could. I don't personally even look back on that and feel regret about not using him. Like, if he went off on your bench, like, you know, I think you were just going to be okay with it because he hadn't gone off for a long time. But now we are left with the question, you know, now what? Steelers, Dolphins on Monday night? Everything to play for Pittsburgh? You know, I haven't fully processed what the receiver ranks are going to look like with no teams on bye for Week 15, but I'd say we have to go a little higher, at least in the ranks with Metcalf next week, and maybe significantly higher. You're taking a chance. It was kind of a one-week shot, but I think we know he's capable of doing this. It just hasn't been something the Steelers have tried to do. Just also, incidentally, this was a Nance Romo game, and per the conversation that Paywall Andy and I had on last Wednesday's show about the best and worst TV analysts for the number 1 teams in this game. If you're not a subscriber, you can still go back and listen to that conversation. That was last Wednesday. Boy, oh boy. I mean, this was bad. Early in this game, Romo says something like, "No one embraces challenges more than Mike Tomlin." No one embraces challenges more than Mike Tomlin. What does that even mean? It's just something to say. It's like I'm going to vaguely flatter him, but also, you know, many people embrace them exactly the same amount, just nobody more. Just totally non-committal verbal diarrhea out of Tony Romo. Anyway, for the Ravens, the announcers also said, "We haven't seen Lamar scramble like this in a month." Buddies, we've said it back-to-back weeks on the show. Anyone who actually watched the games could see that Lamar Jackson was moving around fine, scrambling fine the past couple weeks before this game. That is not the concern with the Ravens. It was, but it hasn't been lately. They just hadn't seen it because they don't really do the work. But anyway, the concern is it's not a great offensive line, and the concern really is it is a bad receiving core after the aforementioned Zay Flowers. Also, Lamar just made one huge mistake, a brutal interception on a third down inside his own territory on the run, trying to throw a pop-up throw in the flat and just biffing it, throwing it directly to the defender. His connection with Flowers is good. It's real. It finally showed in the box score. We told you to keep the faith. Flowers actually blew a couple of catches on back-to-back plays. He had one in the first quarter on the sidelines where he should have gotten his feet down and didn't. Very next play, one goes right through his hands. He's also quick as a hiccup. He saved them on a fourth down late. He got them into the red zone twice where they stalled. Once because of a Rashad Bateman drop, and then one on the final drive. Not technically the final drive. They did get the ball back at the very, very end with no timeouts left. Flowers had 2 long catches, though, on that second to last drive, but then they throw to Isaiah Likely in the end zone. And I don't know what to tell you. That's a touchdown. I assume you've seen the highlight. Everything they taught us about 2 feet down with control. And yes, that's it. The play's over. Football move. Nance and Romo were with me on that one. So it was overturned on replay, called touchdown on the field. So a little bit of a screw job there. But also, it wasn't fourth down. They had another chance. Jackson found an open Mark Andrews on fourth down, and Andrews just didn't get his body turned around in position to make a catch. Winds up with 0 catches on the day. Good thing he just signed him to another contract. I don't understand that. So it's a turnover on downs. Lamar did get it back, as I say, one more time, but just not enough clock. As I said earlier, the Ravens get an insta rematch against the Bengals next week. Was this enough for me to get Lamar Jackson back in the quarterback top 5? I kind of don't think so. It didn't look any different. He had a little more rushing yardage, but he ran around fine those last 2 games, Jets-Bengals. He has a lot of upside, of course, no question. And as we've been saying, his running isn't totally back. Just, clearly it's not. He's not running for 100 yards. He does not have time and room like he usually has in other years. And I think that's about not respecting the receiving core and also the offensive line not being as good. But Jackson did rush for a touchdown here on a quarterback draw. He faked another red zone quarterback draw and threw an easy touchdown to Likely. So we're not burying Jackson totally out of fantasy range. But no, I think he's probably going back about where I had him in that 8 to 12 range next week. All right, let's talk about pretty big upset. The Saints going to Tampa and the ancient rookie Tyler Shuck playing legit hero. Just a few minutes ago on the show, I made a big production about weather never affects anything. Well, all right. It affected about half of this game. The rain, I thought, was worse here than it was in the game in Jacksonville that we'll talk about later in the show. The first quarter was all right. Second and third quarters were pretty messy. And then by the fourth quarter, it just had stopped. Certainly, enough throws and catches were available during the non-downpour parts of this game that I think we should have gotten a better performance out of Baker Mayfield. But yeah, I got to admit, didn't necessarily see it coming, but there were portions of this game where the teams were telling you what they thought of the weather by not really even trying to throw, just run, run, run. A disaster game for Baker Mayfield, and also for some of that fourth down play calling. Just, I don't know. That was not a good play calling effort from Tampa. The first Buccaneer drive was surgical. Ibuka and Godwin each with good gains. Bucky Irving with a screen, and he powers in that ties the game at 7. It did get sloppier after that. You had a fourth down stuff on a Bucky Irving pitch out around midfield, but the Saints would miss a field goal. Sean Tucker would get stuffed back-to-back plays on the 2 most predictable line bucks in NFL history around midfield, late second quarter. They completed a good ball in the rain, but got called for offensive pass interference. The lesson here, obviously, is that rain is always worse than snow. Of course it's not. That's not the lesson. The lesson here is there is no lesson. Usually even in the heavy rain game, you get some production and it clears up, and it did clear up here. Mayfield had chances in the fourth quarter. He threw a weird pick in the third quarter, but after they lost the lead, you don't get the yardage for a deep ball to Tez Johnson that would have been a long completion, but it was pass interference, so they get the yardage. You just don't get it on Baker Mayfield. Rashad White and Tucker would have good runs right after that call. They landed at the 1-yard line. Tucker banged it in for a score. Fourth quarter, a 4th and 3. Godwin should have an easy catch on the sideline. It's not the rain. He takes a hit, not a huge hit, and he bobbles it and falls out of bounds. And it's their third turnover around midfield on downs. And there was another one coming. 4th down at the end. Mayfield runs around and throws it short of the sticks to lose. Now, there was a moment where I wondered, did Bucky Irving get hurt again? Because we got a lot of consecutive plays by White and Tucker, but it appears no. They were just rotating. Maybe the conditions were causing so many run plays. And Bucky had a wonderful cutback run for 32 yards in the fourth quarter. Whereupon, hate to say it, if you have Emeka Egbuka, the tying touchdown in the red zone, kind of right in his hands. I mean, it was an overthrow. It was too high. Mayfield played bad. But Egbuka still should have caught it. He would tell you. Not too good. Obviously, Egbuka has kind of hit what we might call a rookie wall. It's a cliche, but maybe that's what it is. And we have the news that Mike Evans has a chance to come off IR and play next week, which, complicates everything. In this game, Godwin looked like the more reliable guy in bigger spots. And, we probably have to file that away as we prepare for a potentially new dynamic. As, Tampa finds themselves 7-6 and fighting for their playoff lives. They'll play on Thursday night against the Falcons. By the way, Trent Green, quote of the day from this game after Shuck threw an interception. Hey, both coaches talked to us about the importance of turnovers. Like, where's the turnip truck? Like, you don't say, gee, that's what the coaches said? What a unique thing for them to have said to you and for you to have relayed to us as though you were conveying wisdom. Both coaches talked to us about the importance of turnovers. That's something else. Anyway, Shuck was certainly the hero. And the heroism was really done with his legs. Have you seen the winning play? I mean, he's dead. He is sacked. And somehow he weathers the hit, pun intended. He runs around, takes the great circle route, and rushes for his second touchdown of the day, the first coming in the third quarter on a zone read keeper. Could I ever see my way through to using Shuck in an emergency in a superflex? In a superflex where you don't have a good option, probably. The running is real. He's pretty fast and seems kind of hard to tackle, but mistakes certainly lurk. That pick I mentioned, Chris Olave obviously read it as a stop route, and Shuck threw the deep ball thinking that Olave wasn't going to break off his route, so only the corner was standing there to pick it off. Olave was massive on that game-winning drive, converting a 3rd and 10 stop route and then another catch for a first down right after that, but that was 2 of his 3 catches, 3 for 30. Devin Neal was a good story. Early on, he converted a carry from the 1, peeking the ball over the goal line, and during the worst of the rain, he got a little bit of room. He had a 21-yard carry to the outside when the Bucs had stunted to the inside, so it was wide open. I can't really tell you I watched it and thought he did anything extraordinary, and he did relinquish a couple of short yardage situations to the immortal Audric Estime, but Neal also handled a man's workload, 20 touches, possibly works his way into flex-type territory, but I also caution, obviously last week he did 14 for 47, so that will always be on the table as well. We are sponsored by BetterHelp. And I know not everyone hearing the sound of my voice needs therapy this very moment, but everybody hearing the sound of my voice goes through good times and bad, and sometimes just having someone who's outside the day-to-day of your life who you can just say how you're feeling to or what you're thinking about out loud, just having to make it make sense. I know that helps me. I do therapy online. The holidays can be really tough for all sorts of reasons. It's good to know that BetterHelp is there, and if you do feel like you need it, there's really no shame in needing therapy. I hope that's a stigma that's passing, taking care of yourself, but, understanding your own feelings and your own actions. That's a really good idea. This December, start a new tradition by taking care of you. If you go to betterhelp.com/Harris, you'll get 10% off your first month. You take a brief questionnaire, you get matched with a therapist. You can change therapists at any time at no charge. So that's betterhelp.com/Harris, betterhelp.com/Harris. Harris.
Should've started him, should've said him, I'm a child of the possum and Harris lives on a yacht.
I sure do, and we all are children of the possum. I've got a couple of not amazingly close games on my watch list, but of course, you don't really know that until you watch them. Seahawks, Falcons, this is a close game for a half. Atlanta seemed ready for the task. They probably should have been winning 6-3 at the half, but it was tied 6-6. So again, my job is to talk about what it looked like, and can we learn from watching it as opposed to just looking at numbers. I mean, for all those points and that big explosion in the second half, I look at that first half and keep having questions about Sam Darnold. Basically, just one good drive in the first half. Deep in his own territory on a 3rd and 1, Darnold rolled left and threw across his body into tight coverage, deflected by a defender up in the air for a stinky interception. It was rough. The first drive, they lost yards. Darnold was sacked at his own 1. The second drive, it was Zach Charbonnet, got them going with a 27-yard carry. Basically, I'd say the only good run Seattle had the entire day until garbage time. They took a deep shot to JSN in the end zone, no good. It was 4th and 1. They were about to wildcat, but the Falcons jumped off sides. But the drive stalled. JSN did catch it in the back of the end zone, but he was out of bounds, so they kicked a field goal. Really not a lot going on. But right before halftime and right after halftime, this guy took over.
The way you stretch the field, you really burn them all. The Rogers on Harmon.
The Ruger. Part 2. Rashid Shaheed makes a catch over the middle to set up the field goal right before halftime. Then opening kick of the third quarter, Shaheed just houses it, takes it 100 yards. Then suddenly it's 13-6 Seattle. And let's be fair, the second half counts too. And, the Seahawks and Sam Darnold decided to be less wary of A.J. Terrell covering JSN. Back-to-back plays, JSN wins at the release and runs a deep cross, the first from the left side of the formation, and then immediately the same play, but just inverted from the right side of the formation. The second one, he goes for a touchdown, and it's 20-6. A good drive to start the fourth quarter. Cooper Kupp scores in the flat from the red zone, and it's 30-9, and obviously over. In a late possession from the 3, Kenneth Walker was in for one play, but they go play action, it's incomplete, and then Charbonnet immediately was in, and they gave him a carry, but he was stuffed. And then third down, Darnold scrambles up the middle, but pulls up. JSN is open. It's JSN's second touchdown. So you got 30 snaps out of Walker, 25 out of Charbonnet. A few of those Charbonnet snaps were in Basora time, but the only carry inside the 5 was that Charbonnet play when it was pretty close to over. I guess it wasn't totally over, and he lost 2 yards on it anyway. Not good, I think. You probably still keep Walker ahead of Charbonnet in the ranks, but maybe they feel a little closer. Certainly very good that JSN got over his 1 week blip. For the Falcons, it was a heavy dose of Bijan Robinson. I think they understand the assignment, which is good, and he had a bunch of yards in the first half doing Bijan things. Unfortunately, down 7, third quarter, they launch a good drive, they're in the red zone, and Bijan Robinson fumbles it away. It was a crusher. Robinson would have 3 more carries the rest of the game, none in the fourth quarter. He only played 5 snaps in the fourth quarter. Therefore, it's going to look like Tyler Algier. Wow, big threat. Not really. They had kind of decided to pull the parachute, as they say. Algier did get a couple of carries inside the 5 at the end of a garbage drive at the end and was stuffed both times, whereupon Darnell Mooney dropped a 4th down in the end zone. Anyone who would say Kirk Cousins is sinking this offense isn't watching. I was about to say anyone watching this says that. I don't think if you're saying Kirk Cousins is sinking the offense, you didn't watch. I don't know what else to tell you. He's not great, but you're going to see 2 interceptions on the score sheet. Would you like to hear about them? One was batted up in the air by Kyle Pitts. The other was batted up in the air by David Sills. Would you like to hear about the deep ball that Cousins laid in perfectly for a long touchdown in the second quarter to Darnell Mooney, except Mooney had either run his route out of bounds or been shoved on his route out of bounds, and the officials didn't call illegal contact. They probably should have. The coaches were going crazy for Atlanta, and therefore that perfect touchdown pass, that bomb, was nullified. I'm not trying to be, I'm not a big defender of this guy.
Me and Kirk Cousins and you and Kirk Cousins on a team that wants to run it.
My point on Cousins just continues to be, he's not that bad. And if Drake London did get back in time for fantasy playoff games, I would feel okay about him because I don't think Kirk Cousins is sinking the offense. As for Pitts, well, all right. Well, it's 6 for 90 in the box score, and none of it was in garbage time. His highs in this game were actually legit wonderful. The second drive, he had a catch to get him into the red zone, but on 4th and 3, Raheem Morris got some booze by kicking a field goal. You're 4-8, dude. What are you doing? At the 2-minute warning of the first half, Pitts made a sick downfield grab, catching the back half of the ball, which led to Mooney's controversial non-touchdown being shoved out of bounds. But that was good stuff. The best things that Kyle Pitts did in this game, that one deep highlight, if you go take a look at that, that's the dream that the Falcons certainly had by making him, the number 4 overall pick, and all the people who backed him as a fantasy guy thought he was such a great prospect. That's what he thought he would do constantly. He obviously doesn't, but he's capable of it, which is all the more frustrating because Pitts also killed Atlanta's first drive with a drop, and he also popped up that one pass for a pick. The game was probably never winnable because Seattle eventually did get their stuff together. And the biggest play of the game was none of those guys. It was Bijan Robinson's fumble. But, I guess if you're utterly dead at tight end and there's no Drake London next week against the Buccaneers, okay. Use Kyle Pitts. I get it. Cousins has been treating Pitts like his top option. And you can tell yourself a story that says, I don't care too much about the bad plays. As long as they keep throwing into him and he makes a couple of good plays, there's something there for me in the box score. And meanwhile, Seattle gets a home date with the much degraded Colts. We'll talk about them in a little bit. And we've got the Rams absolutely destroying the Cardinals. The first drive was great for the Cardinals. They go right straight down the field. Trey McBride, 2 catches. Michael Wilson scores a touchdown. Looked really easy. Then first play of the second quarter is a 3rd and 5, and Wilson wins going to the post, and he almost houses it. He gets shoestring tackled. It would set them up for a field goal that tied it at 10. And is there a fast forward button on live TV? I was watching it live, and I'm sure at that point, I know a lot of Cardinal fans listen to this show, and you might have been watching like I was live at that point and been thinking to yourself, oh, heck yeah, Jacoby Brissett. He can be our quarterback of the future. Things look so much easier on offense with him than Kyler Murray. Yeah, about that. Brissett, I don't know. Did he really do anything wrong? Late third quarter, he did. He threw a pick on a 3rd and 8 deep in his own territory. He also didn't do a lot right. Michael Wilson had a huge first half. You'd be forgiven for believing that Brissett was unacquainted with any other wideouts on this team. Good to know, as we keep saying, Arizona's a mess. All you really had to do was send pressure, and Brissett was completely helpless, which is a lot of his history. But it's a mess. Arizona will still throw it a million times, and obviously Michael Wilson can pay off. He scores the second touchdown in an entire fourth quarter of Basura time. But certainly, let's disavow ourselves of the notion. Arizona will be back to the drawing board at quarterback next year. The Rams, wagon, obviously one of the great offenses this year. They certainly did figure out early in this game that, oh man, the Cardinals defense was never, ever going to be able to stop the run. Arizona started the game playing back on defense and hoping they could just kind of, bend but don't break, play conservative, keep everything in front of them. But both Kyron Williams and Blake Corum went crazy from the very beginning. It never stopped the power run game. They could run out of any set they wanted. They did it out of 3 receivers. They did it out of 3 tight ends. It all worked. Both running backs went off. The thing to realize for sure is that from the very first series, Corum is in there. He had gash runs while the first half was still semi in doubt. The first time they got in close, Corum tackled at the 8. Oh, you knew what they would try to do at that point.
There was a jerk face touchdown. Make me MVP.
He tried 3 straight throws to Devontae Adams, 2 missed passes by Matthew Stafford, And for the only time during the competitive portion of the game, they had to be satisfied with a field goal. But then Puka does 2 deep catches. Corum gets a couple of carries down to the 2, and they didn't jerk face from that point. They kind of felt like they established it. Corum scored from the 2. Next drive, Kyron scored from the 5. End of the first half, a knife through butter, another drive just so easy. Puka scored his first touchdown. It was 24-10 at the half. Colby Parkinson, Puka, then just trying to kind of be merciful in the fourth quarter. I mean, that was sort of basura for Corum, a long touchdown. I don't know if they're trying to score, but, he's hard to start. I know it's a huge game out of Corum, and I actually had 2 leagues where I started him because, those teams aren't very good. Beginning next week, as soon as the Lions, can we consider Blake Corum as a must start? It's hard to say Blake Corum RB24, but in a pickle, can you do it? Can you do the second running back in one of the elite offensive environments? He's going to get a third of the work. It's just they're going to feature Kyron Williams most of the time. It's one of the environments you want to own somebody in. I'd say, as an emergency flex, you can probably... I think I'm going to have a playoff game where I have to use Blake Corum myself. It's not a very good team, though. That should be an indication. Adams, it was bound to happen. You're not going to get clever with him. The Cardinals in Week 15 will throw it again a million times, this time against the Texans, while, as I mentioned, the Rams will play the Lions.
Monday Night Preview.
It had the potential to be a classic, but Eagles-Chargers certainly at least has the schadenfreude going on with 2 offenses that look like 2 of the best back in September, and now we watch them play and we think, so you're playoff teams, huh? We've honestly chronicled them both within an inch of their lives week by week. Philly's past month has gotten their offensive coordinator's house egged, but you can't really sit any of their guys. You just hope that this is one of those weeks where they find the right mix, where they figure it out. The secret problem with Philly and the not-so-secret problem with LA, probably the offensive lines not functioning like they can, and because of injury. In the Chargers case, we've gone over it and over it. Very high-profile tackles who are out for the season, and the whole thing just needs to operate around somehow getting the ball out quick, and the defense knows that, and also trying to run, and the defense knows that, and when it's a bad defense, they can usually get away with it, but I don't think anybody thinks Philly's defense is bad. And the Eagles, they don't have Lane Johnson, and they haven't really replaced how well Mekhi Becton played last year, so that entire side of the offensive line's been weaker, and the center has been, had a concussion and been out of the lineup on occasion as well. And, maybe what I just described shouldn't be enough to create such an existential crisis for an offense, but here we are. You can't argue they aren't having one. I think such is the quarterback, Jalen Hurts, that the whole thing can turn into a house of cards because he kind of needs everything to be working really, really well. But yeah, fantasy-wise, it's a broken record. You're pretty much locked into your Eagles. The Chargers have more moving parts at this moment, with Justin Herbert playing with a broken left hand, and also Amari and Hampton returns for this game, giving us the question of, how fast does he get worked into the main gig? How quickly does Kimani Vidal's relevance go away?
You can't legislate usage.
I know that's mostly what some of you want me to do. Why can't you just tell me how many carries Hampton's going to have and how many Vidal is going to have? It's your job. But it's really not my job. I'm no better at guessing workload in a situation like this than you are. You could see over the weekend that I got Hampton into the running back ranks ahead of Vidal. That 100% could be wrong. Just basing it on the past couple of games, it feels like the Chargers need something new, and Hampton played well before his injury. The Charger receivers, we've just spent so long talking about the tackle injuries and the trickle-down effect for all Charger players that, it's like a slow-motion car crash. Someone asked on the Sunday morning live stream yesterday, I honestly forgot who they were comparing him to, but it was Lad McConkey and somebody, and they said, I'd rather use the Lad Young Lad. And I said, I totally understand it. McConkey was headed for a bad day in Week 13, but he saved himself with a touchdown. He tends to do that. He's good. How excited I am to use him, or Keenan Allen, or Gulp Quentin Johnston, comes down to how functional the offense can be for like windows in a game. We know they're going to get some pressure at times, but can they find some drives that are pretty good? And then you add in the variable of we normally would be pretty terrified about playing Philly's defense, but last time out against the Bears, they got boat raced by Chicago's run game, and they're not going to have Jalen Carter in this game tonight. So the ranks are what they are. You can see them at harrisfootball.com. We will stress out about it. We will watch it, and I will talk about it off the top of Tuesday's show. We are sponsored by Rocket Money, the personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitor your spending, and lower your bills so you can grow your savings. I've told the story of my PlayStation subscription. I didn't realize I was still paying. I didn't even have that PlayStation anymore. So that was great. Rocket Money found it and helped me cancel. Also an old ESPN Plus membership. Yeah, I did not want that anymore. Rocket Money shows all your expenses in one place, including subscriptions you may have forgotten about, and their dashboard lays out your entire financial picture, including bill due dates. If you've got a goal you'd like to save for, Rocket Money can help with that. It can analyze your accounts, and they even try to negotiate lower bills for you. Rocket Money has saved users over $2.5 billion, including $880 million in canceled subscriptions alone. Their 10 million members save up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/Harris. That's rocketmoney.com/Harris. rocketmoney.com/Harris.
Today's guest.
Wide receivers, they got to be approved by you to ride with me. Oh, don't you know now is the perfect time to tell us which team your lifelong banner, but do it now before tomorrow's today. Or today is tomorrow. I want to know, boy, young boy, who should I target in the later rounds?
And as promised, today's guest is the boy, young boy. It's Matt Harmon. Find him all over social media. Just look up his name. You will find him. And also, obviously, his stuff at Yahoo is great. And he does lots of shows with Yahoo. And also receptionperception.com. You should be a member. I'm going to ask him about receivers. He does a lot of good things. Receivers are definitely one of those things. Hello, Matthew. How are you?
Christopher, always good to talk to you here early on a Monday morning. Earlier for you than for me, but yeah, man, I think we got three. One of the games did not turn out the way that we wanted it to. That is for sure, for a variety of different reasons. But I think we had three very impactful games here to talk through, and I'm excited to break down several things from each of them.
Indeed. And, we had the running joke that for a couple of segments of your guests, this will be your final one of the season. And for a couple of them, we didn't pick great. But for this one, we picked good. Colts Jags, we'll start with. The obvious talking point here is the sad ending for Daniel Jones. Yeah. The question that you and I are going to get asked forever now for the rest of this season is going to be something that we don't really know, which is like, hey, can all my Colts receivers I wanted to use be good with Riley Leonard? I don't know. How was Riley Leonard here?
I thought he was fine-ish for the expectations of a sixth-round rookie. I think he operated quick game pretty well. I thought he obviously, dating back to college, has some mobility. He could be kind of used at times in his collegiate career as almost like a battering ram runner, and that is at times how Daniel Jones has been used by certain staffs. So we saw him get a rushing touchdown here, and like I said, I thought it's hard to say because so much of it in the fourth quarter is just, the Jags really playing back on defense. They're not really getting up physical with these wide receivers, which is typically the times when you're in those too high shells and they're playing soft zone. That's when you're going to see Michael Pittman have a bunch of targets anyways because of the route tree that he runs. So again, I'm not trying to be too like big takeaways from this. Riley Leonard really likes this guy or he doesn't like this guy or whatever. I think it's the game script was really tough, but I honestly, I would say I think it could have been worse. I think it could have been worse than Riley Leonard's like first debut to the NFL. I think it could have been worse. So I'm not trying to paint like an optimistic picture, but I think Riley Leonard probably profiled based on talking with people that really liked him, like Nate Tice, who works with me at Yahoo, really liked him as a kind of a sleeper prospect. The way he was sort of describing it to me, going back and forth, that he kind of described a dollar store Daniel Jones type of prospect, anyways. So again, my overall theme with Leonard is it wasn't amazing or anything, but I think it could have been worse.
It's funny. I later in the day, so I watched Colts Jags live, and then later in the day, in the evening, I watched the Saints upset the Buccaneers, and I was like, maybe the same guy, Shuck. It was like similar. I felt like
cut from similar cloths.
Yeah, cut from similar cloths, and it's going to be a downgrade. Like there's nothing else. Michael Pittman, that he scored a touchdown early third quarter. That was a terrible offensive pass interference call.
Yeah.
There's been an epidemic of those.
It really has. Like, what is up with that?
Yeah, it's weird thing that nobody asked for. So Pittman should have had a touchdown that would have made it 28-17. They would have been within 11, and they were never catching them. It's a downgrade. Like the bottom line is downgrade for everybody. I don't know how you get away from using Jonathan Taylor, but like you could probably get away from using Pittman. You probably get away from using Pierce. They're going to join that infinite sadness of wide receiver threes.
No question. Especially, I do think Pierce relies so much on placement outside the numbers. Obviously, and I've been talking about this all year, he is a player who has really expanded his game. He's grown his game. He's not just that sacrificial X receiver anymore. But the reason he's one of the most productive wideouts in the NFL against single high coverage is because he's that X receiver who runs that straight line route tree on a variety of his patterns, and he's going to rely on that placement. And I think Daniel Jones, to his credit, he'd really gotten away from being a prolific deep passer in the latter parts of his Giants tenure, and we certainly saw him get back to that with Pierce in particular this season. I think Pittman can probably develop into something of a PPR scam type wide receiver where he's just getting peppered in the short and underneath game, which is kind of what we saw in this one. But I do think Pierce is a pretty big loser, and I wonder how much like manufactured stuff is going to go Tyler Warren's way now, because they've already kind of had an inkling to do that, and this might push them further into that as well.
So for the Jags, the development is probably Brian Thomas catching two deep balls, one with one hand. Jacoby Myers, it felt like when this game was close coming out early on, they used him more in more situations. He winds up scoring touchdown. But Brian Thomas, like I was told, it's impossible for Trevor Lawrence to hit Brian Thomas on a deep ball. Was this enough for you to restore a little bit of belief if people have been hanging on to Brian Thomas like at the bottom of a potential starting lineup?
I still think it's going to be a bumpy ride the rest of this year, but to me, I've kind of just accepted the fact that 2025 is going to go down as a lost year for Brian Thomas, almost no matter what happens towards the end of the season. And I do think that he can build some positive momentum here. And really, to me, it's all about, like, if you're invested in Brian Thomas Jr. in Dynasty, if you want to get in on him as a bounce back candidate for next year, this is kind of like a good information gathering period. I still think he is playable as a wide receiver 3 the rest of the way. I don't think he's going to suddenly turn back into the player that he was at the end of last season when he put up a bunch of bonkers production for a team that was losing games with Mac Jones and whatever. I don't think he's necessarily going to turn into that guy from a stat sheet perspective, but this to me is about like recovering the rest of his career going forward, not to sound dramatic about it. And I do think that there's a lot, like Brian Thomas it's kind of a knotty conversation that we certainly don't have to unpack the entire thing here on this show. But, I think that a lot of what's happened with him this year, you can trace a lot of it back to the fact that he's potentially been playing with injuries all season long. He had the wrist thing that they talked about. They had the shoulder thing. And he's got, like, it's been one thing after another from an injury perspective with him. And I also think that they came into this year, and Liam Cohen even talked about it at the beginning of his time with Jacksonville. I remember at the combine presser talking about, man, I didn't realize he could do this and do this and do this and do that. And then I think they kind of overexpanded him into things that he maybe wasn't completely ready for at this stage of his developmental career. And then it's been like a paring back type of thing for him all year long, which is not a negative necessarily. It's just right now where he is, there are certain things that he's great at and certain things that he's not as good at. And I think with Jacoby Myers in place the rest of the way, like this team's going to make the playoffs. So not just the rest of the regular season, rest of fantasy season, but into the postseason, Myers can handle kind of that dirty work over the middle, zone beater, move around, playing the F receiver position. And then that's going to allow Brian Thomas to just essentially stick on ball as the X receiver and run those vertical routes, which we saw him make 2 big plays on vertical routes in this game. And I think that's much better for him to continue to build up his confidence the rest of this year, next year. Like this is a guy that they should be pouring into, a guy they should be developing. So to me, I think I am confident in him in terms of him being like a kind of boom bust wide receiver 3 the rest of the way, and somebody that I think is totally viable to put into your starting fantasy lineup. And really, again, the more important thing to me is how do we build this guy's confidence up so that he is a high impact player for us in Jacksonville next year? And I do think the Jags are on the right track with that. And Myers' addition is a pretty big variable in all of it.
Packers Bears, a listener, Jeff Frakes, writes in, quote, at about 7 minutes, 23 seconds left in the third quarter, it certainly sounded like Jordan Love called alert, alert, followed by gerbil. He then handed off to Josh Jacobs. Does Green Bay have a gerbil call to audible to a run to the jacked gerbil? Worth a rewatch. I've done it 3 times, says Jeff, and I swear he says gerbil. So Jack Gerbil is what we've been calling Josh Jacobs on the show forever. So that would be my favorite thing in the world if the Packers had heard that and been like, sure, that's our audible call for a run to Josh Jacobs.
That would be epic. Yeah. I mean, hey, you can't rule it out. It's not impossible. Let's say the odds are not 0%.
That's right. Let me start with another wide receiver question. Frankly, it's the biggest thing that comes out of this game, I think, for the next 3 weeks, which is what we really care about right now, which is Christian Watson. Has he turned really reliable? I mean, numbers-wise, he definitely has. As you said with Alec Pierce, it feels like Watson is not just a go ball guy anymore, not just a jump ball guy, but he still has a lot of speed. How real do you find this to be?
I think pretty real. I think Christian Watson has never looked better to me so far, like what we've seen this year based on any other year of his career. You know, I think he was like a very volatile player in his first 2 seasons. I think he was kind of sort of coming around last year, but it was just so hard to tell because it was very limited sample, injuries. That's always been the theme with Watson. And luckily, knock on wood, we haven't seen any of that so far since he's come back from a torn ACL this year. Like, it's still crazy to me. He tore that thing in January of this year, and he is playing at this level, which I think is the best of his career. And I think these last 2 weeks really, but especially in this game, you did see some pretty important developments as he continues to move along here. Because when he first got back, he was making a lot of plays against zone coverage, these long developing routes, particularly deeper posts, corner routes, not just the go routes, but deeper posts and corners against zone coverage. And then you started to kind of see him win as a contested catch receiver. And that's another thing that he was very hit or miss on in his first 2 years. Wasn't always the best contested catch receiver. I think he's been great at that this year. And then, especially in this game, but also kind of in the Lions game as well, I think you started to see his work against man coverage really step up a little bit here. And it's important that they have their full arsenal of wide receivers. I know Tucker Kraft obviously is gone for the season, but their full arsenal of wide receivers, like the play where Christian Watson has the long catch and run against man coverage, having Jaden Reed on the field to move somebody out of the way there in man coverage really helps, and have somebody get eyes on him. He's just a more threatening player than some of the other guys that they've had in that receiver room. And then you see Watson really make like 3 big plays on these in-breaking routes. And that to me is a good sign that we're going in the right direction with Watson here. I just really don't think we've ever seen him play at this level before. It's almost like he's probably not as fast. He's obviously still a fast player. He's probably not as fast in a straight line as he once was. And I almost think that's been better for him. I think it's been better for him to sort of focus on the actual technique of the position instead of trying to out-athlete people. So I think we've really seen a player that's taken a step forward this year, which I did not have on my bingo card because I just didn't think he was going to be a big part of this season after tearing his ACL in January.
Yeah, and Jaden Reed is back. And still gadgety. I'm not using Jaden Reed in a fantasy playoff game. He's good, and he's rendering the other guys. You just don't want to use them. I think you do want to use Watson pretty clearly. A week after the run game for Chicago went crazy against Philadelphia, they tried here. It was largely bottled up, and it kind of became a Caleb Williams game. We call him the referendum around here because every game is a referendum on Caleb Williams.
So good.
He is usually a disaster throwing on the run. And in this game, up until the very end, obviously made the big mistake at the end in the end zone, but that's what kept the Bears afloat in this. Like, if that's going to be Caleb Williams throwing on the run, they're onto something.
Yeah, I think he's either a complete disaster or the best quarterback you've ever seen when he's throwing on the run. And there's like no in between. I'd love it if we could kind of get like a 70th percentile, a 60th percentile outcome, but usually it's either 0th or 100, in terms of the percentile outcome for him on the run. But yeah, I mean, the first half was about as rocky as it could get for Caleb Williams. The placement's off. He's under pressure. I think he's really taken a step forward in terms of his response and like not taking sacks to pressure. But I also think now we need to take the next step, which is get under pressure and then let's keep firing down the field and make some accurate throws. That's obviously been a problem for him. In the second half, they just spammed the hell out of play action over and over and over again. And I thought he was turning his back and making quick decisions when he got back front facing and making some good plays. He's a really creative screen thrower I know that sounds so crazy to highlight this, but the placement on the screen to Luther Burden on the third down, like that was really impressive. So he has these great arm angles that I think he's still learning to hone. I overall think that while it's not a consistent, every week it gets better and better, like there are peaks and valleys. I think over the long, like the stock market, over the long haul, it's trending up. It's not just a steady climb every single week. Don't take financial advice from me, by the way. But yeah, so that to me, Caleb Williams is kind of where he's at. And yeah, I mean, the run game obviously didn't dominate like it did in Philadelphia last week, but it was very successful. They just didn't get any big plays from the run game.
Yeah. And then no Rome Odunze and DJ Moore
boy.
They didn't. He needs to get out of there. He needs to get out of there. He's still a good player. He might be somewhat diminished, but he's still a good player. I mean, there's the trick play flip that runs him directly into a defensive tackle. He gets flattened. And then near the red zone, they try to throw him a screen, and they smack him in the face before the ball even gets there. Something's not right.
He's a bad fit for the offense. He is, because this is a very detailed based offense. And like DJ Moore it's so hard to tell because I think he had a horrific season last year. Like to his standards, it was a terrible season in Chicago last year. And he's a guy that needs to be used in specific ways. So it's just kind of hard for me to like calibrate to where DJ is right now. Because I think he had a great start to his career. He had a great 2023 season with Justin Fields, but like you don't need to be a very detailed player to win with Justin Fields and like that kind of goofy offense that he's going to lend himself to. But you need to be that detailed player with Ben Johnson and these guys. And like, he is definitely not that player. So it's just, he's almost just kind of been a sacrificial player all season long. I didn't expect him to step up here with Rome Odunze out. The interesting thing to me was like the Luther Burden part of it here. And Burden did not get this was also kind of on my radar. Burden did not play anymore in terms of route percentage, snaps, any of that stuff than he does when Rome Odunze is playing. And to me, like Luther Burden is a very promising player. And I really liked his work against zone coverage, maybe more than I expected this year. I think his details have been better. And like, this is a staff that is clear. I think they don't even really care. Like if you give him truth serum, they don't really care like about DJ Moore beyond this year. Like I think it's over. He'll be somewhere else next year and Burden will essentially just take his spot. But they're clearly hard on Burden. They're pouring into Burden. They want him to be like one of their big guys in 2026 and beyond. But for this year, they don't trust him. And I think for good reason, don't trust him to be like a full scale wide receiver. So you saw Olamide Zaccheaus essentially just drop into Rome Odunze's kind of very important role in the offense, not just from a target perspective, but he does a lot in the run game. He moves around. He plays all three receiver positions. And like, you can complain about it because you want to start Luther Burden in fantasy football, but that's just, they trust Zacchaeus to handle the pre-snap stuff, all the things they trust Roma Dunze to do, and they're just not there with Luther Burden. Like, I do think Burden's a good player, and he will be a 2026 breakout candidate. But for this year, and this one in particular, I don't think we saw anything where it's like, oh yeah, Burden is going to be smashing down the stretch, as much as I really, really do like him as a player.
All right, and then the night game, we obviously reached the end of even Patrick Mahomes' powers, losing another offensive tackle on the first play of the game, Wanye Morris. Absolute horror night on offense. And then, I mean, the biggest concern, honestly, is, you have Mahomes, you have Kelsey, you have Rice, you have Worthy, you have the running backs, and you got the Chargers and Broncos in 2 of the 3 fantasy playoff weeks. How much, based on seeing what this looks like with this offensive line? I mean, I did a preview of the Charger game tonight, in which I'm like, yeah, I don't want any part of the Chargers really right now because of that offensive line. Like, this is worse. How much are you reconsidering your Chiefs?
Oh, I think it's a big time recalibration. I don't want to overreact here because you go against the Texans defense, they're gonna make your life tough, baby. That is a hard defense to play against on a variety of different levels. But Mahomes under duress, that's gonna be a problem. And to me, like, it goes beyond the offensive line here. Like, I think that this Chiefs team has been building to this collapse for a minute now, because I just don't think the roster is good enough. And I think that they have diluted themselves into both their scheme, and the types of players that they pursue, which is a longer conversation, and it's one I've been having all year. It's a long conversation that we need to do for this space right now. But there's a way that you can, get yourself through games and can put up these big numbers to, like, Rashee Rice, and have Travis Kelce on the catch and run plays and all that stuff, if your protection is good. But then you see, like, to me, it's such a fragile build with where they are right now. You drop like one grain of sand and the whole machine starts to sort of collapse. And that is what I'm concerned about, especially against those 2 defenses down the stretch. They got a game, against the Titans and the Raiders. I think the Raiders is in week 18, so whatever. But, that Titans game, you're going to start your guys in fantasy. That's going to be great. But I am a little worried about what this offense looks like against those 2 really good defenses down the stretch.
Me too, and yet I'm not going to be ranking Patrick Mahomes as QB 20. Like,
no, yeah.
So, like, he's probably still in my lineup, and Rashee Rice is probably still in my lineup, and I don't have another tight end, so Kelsey's probably still in my lineup. I don't need to use Worthy. That's relief.
No,
that's
been
and
over.
I don't.
It's been over. Yeah,
it has been over, and we don't have to use the running backs if we don't want to. We can. It was all Isaiah Pacheco.
These running backs.
Yeah, it was all Pacheco early. They tried, but he just didn't do anything. And like, I think it's all fruit from the poisonous tree, because it is, as much as we want to say, I hear you about the build. I hear you. But when you have no tackles left, when you're playing an undrafted rookie at left tackle who wasn't really a prospect, it's hard. It's going to be hard. Everything's just going to be hard, like you said, especially against Houston. And if you were trying to find the moment when Pacheco flipped the switch, he absolutely didn't. And in fact, in short yardage, it was still Kareem Hunt. He gets a short touchdown. And by the end, it was all Kareem Hunt. They basically kind of like fall back into the old ways. The snap count was 38-21 in Hunt's favor.
Yeah. It's crazy how much they just like have this unbelievable faith in Kareem Hunt, and it's like, well, things aren't going too well. Let's just start getting 0 to 5 yard games with Kareem Hunt over and over again. We're not going to get any explosives, but at least we'll stay on schedule, and then we'll hope that Patrick can bail us out on 3rd down. And he couldn't do it last night, not just because of him or anything, for all the reasons that I said. So yeah, I think that this backfield has been brutal in fantasy all year. When it's just Kareem Hunt, he is a guy that you can kind of start and hate yourself, but you'll get points out of it. With Pacheco back, Pacheco's given me, he's just giving me nothing all year. He hasn't given us nothing really since he had the injury last year. Maybe he's not the same player, but I also think that he's a very particular type of runner, and with the state of the offensive line, like, his style of running is never going to fly.
So the Texans defense, obviously incredible. It's so good. The offense, not so much. And they had a good start to this game, and Nico Collins made his bones very, very early on. Every defense playing against Houston should just throw every player they can at the line of scrimmage, because that offensive line can't block anybody either. And CJ Stroud made some absolutely heroic throws here, but they should have won this game by 30.
Yeah, they should have blown out Kansas City. But especially they came out of the half and it was very clear that Spagnuolo saw exactly what you do, which is just, hey, like it's this offensive line, I think, has gone from the worst in the league, like straight up dead last 32nd, unfunctional to start the year, to maybe 25th. It's definitely bad. Like Trent Brown being at right tackle is a big upgrade from what they had because they've been able to kick Titus Howard inside. Like that has been a big change for them. But again, it's going from unplayable to just bad. It's still bad. And I think their protection plans leave a lot to be desired. So that, I think, is where Spagnuolo in the half was like, all right, we're just going to heat these guys up. And they went 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. Just there, they could not pick up blitzes. They could not identify extra rushers. And I think it's been a little bit of just a growing season for Stroud in terms of operating more at the line of scrimmage, which is definitely they're putting more on his plate in this system than previously. And it would be nice if he could also have that growing season while not having at best the 25th the best offensive line in the NFL. So I think that's just going to be a problem for this Texans team all year. But at the very least, it's a little bit better than it was, because I think if the Texans team that we saw in the first half of the season, especially the first month and a half of the season, was out there, like the Chiefs win that game and it's embarrassing for Houston because they can't move the football. But at least they're getting Nico going. At least the protection is somehow improved from where it was. So I still, to me, don't feel great about Houston's offense, but all I really care about from a fantasy standpoint, like you're getting too cute if you're playing anybody other than Nico Collins and Woody Marks as kind of a low end running back too. And that's really all I care about. And I think they can at least do that right now.
I agree. It was a shot in the face to have a shot in the face to Woody Marks, where it looked like he was concussed, but I think actually he just got like grass in his eyes. And so for one play, Dario Ogunbowale comes in and steals a touchdown. Goal line maven, goal line thief, Dario Ogunbowale. While I have you, I'm running a little over, but I'd love to have your opinion, because I agree with you. We're not using him, but Jaden Higgins did show up at a big moment when they really needed it in the second half of that game. He's started to look a little frisky. We're not using him for fantasy, but like for those of us in Dynasty, he's starting to look like the one who's going to emerge there.
Yeah, Higgins was a prospect that he's one of those guys that was not a great collegiate separator, and I'm always concerned with those players because I think they can go to an offense and
Keon Coleman.
Like literally, yes, it was what I was about to say. They could be Keon Coleman and they're stuck in that X receiver role because like he's big and he wins contested catches. Like that's our X receiver. And look, Coleman's obviously made his own problems and like show up on time, pal. I'm not gonna sit here and be like, well, if they used him off ball and in this, like show up to work and like, come on, let's be a professional here. And that's one area where I think Higgins actually, number one, he's benefited from the deployment. Like his games were, he had to play like in place of Nico Collins or was playing a lot of like outside on the line early on this season, like in the reception perception rookie report that's on the site right now, the results were not really good. But I think you've seen him more lately use more off ball, use more in motion, used into the slot. And like, that is where he's going to thrive. Like, so going to Houston was always huge for Higgins because they have an X in Nico Collins. Like he's going to maybe play X receiver on 20% of his snaps at most. And it's frankly been less than that so far when Nico Collins has been healthy. So Higgins has the fluidity to win against zone coverage. He can win on like big crossers, which has been good to see, big post routes, dig routes. And he had, again, for all the problems I had with him as a separator, I said consistently he had maybe the best set of hands in the draft. And like that's been a huge boost for him. He's so good at the catch point. So I think Houston has a hit on Jaden Higgins to some degree. And now we'll see like what can he add to his game? How can he grow that? And like I still really like Jalen Noel. This is another team that I think if they ditch guys like, which they will, ditch guys like Christian Kirk, Xavier Hutchinson in the offseason, and like they go into next season with just a 3-receiver set of Nico Collins, Jaden Higgins, and Jalen Noel, that's going to be pretty sweet in 2026 and beyond.
As long as they draft some tackles, please draft some offensive linemen who could play.
We don't need any pass catchers this year. Okay, Houston, we're all set on that. You don't need to trade 7th round picks for Christian Kirk types, whatever. Just get some tackles, get some interior linemen. Let's be serious about the line this offseason. I do think this Texans offense could be pretty good in 2026.
All right, Matt. Well, you were good in 2025. You came on the show a bunch this year, as you've done for the entire history of this show. You're one of our absolute favorites. You're great. I would love folks to check out receptionperception.com because the insights that Matt brings, I mean, and I don't want to pigeonhole you only as a receiver guy because you're good at everything, but obviously this is where you're focusing a lot of your energy, and in the off season is when it's going to get great because the film study will only continue at receptionperception.com. So check it out. There's free stuff on there. I really recommend a subscription as well. You're the best for doing this for as long as you've been doing it. Thank you so much, Matt.
Appreciate it, Chris. Yeah, it's always good to talk with you. And yeah, I'm looking forward to a really big offseason, and I'll be back on the show for, in short order, I'm sure.
And thank you so much for listening. Let me also thank today's sponsors who made today's show possible. We had AG1, BetterHelp, and Rocket Money. If you were interested in anything I had to say about today's sponsors, I put their information in today's show notes. Easy for you to scroll and click and use the codes. That really helps a lot if you do that. All the current sponsors are listed at harrisfootball.com, including a bunch of holiday gift ideas. Not too late for those. And you know, the drill is basically if you have the way, the means, and you can see your way through to having a need, that's how this whole show keeps happening. And let's face it, this is the 11th season that has happened, so the amount of ownership that you all take of this show is truly great and amazing, and affords me the ability to make the show for so many years. I thank you so much for that. If you don't currently have the means to support a sponsor, I'm so happy to have you listening. Please don't sweat it. That's going to do it for this film review show on a Monday. I'm going to go watch the rest of the week 14 games. Was it week 14? It was. And I'll tell you what I think I saw on Tuesday's show, including the Monday night game. And then it's time to start thinking about those fantasy playoffs. We'll start it out with a waiver wire. Jeff Bell will be my guest to come up with some adds and drops that could help us here in emergency time as we get into those fantasy playoffs. Until then, thanks again so much for listening. Your hat is awesome. You're awesome for wearing it. I will talk to you tomorrow.
The Harris Football Podcast's opening theme is Under the Gun by Apex Manor. The closing theme is Say Yes by The Wellspring. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and never miss an episode.